Assad has fallen. The Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad, the last of his family that has been ruling for 53 years in a lightning offensive by a number of radical groups in Syria, has fallen. He has fled the country, and according to some reports, he may have even been killed when a plane was shot down by the rebel groups leaving Damascus. That is, at this moment, unclear. Even though this thing has been happening at lightning speed, and so many things we don't know yet. I wanted to bring you up to date on what's going on because there is a lot that we do know, and I wanted to tell you as much as we know at this point. So, given that in mind, I wanted to get into some of the things that we have been told so far about what's happening. What we know for certain is that the rebels have defeated Bashar al-Assad. And listen, this starts back on. Well, I mean, the war itself, to kind of put it in context, began in 2011 with a civil war that began. It was raging just, violently for a bunch of years. You had all kinds of folks pouring weapons into there. That was certainly if not an overt, a covert attempt by the United States to get regime change. We funded all these so-called moderate rebel groups, which of course we now know were nothing of the sort. What somebody wants to call a moderate today is a radical tomorrow, or in the eyes of other people is a radical anyway. But as I think I've told you a few times before, some of the groups that the Obama administration funded, one through the CIA, another through the Pentagon, end up turning on each other. The guns and all the weapons that we send to the area get out of anyone's control, and it just causes more and more mayhem. And we have no idea what was going on. We just wanted to overthrow Bashar al-Assad back then. And here's one of the big problems with that. You never know what's going to come next. And I don't know why people think that if you get rid of a leader you don't like, that somehow things are going to be better, even when you have no idea what's going to come next. And that's really the situation that we're in right now. And just real quick, this offensive started on the 27th of November, so just a week or so ago. And again, to put things in the near-term context, since about 2020, when Aleppo, after 4 years of fighting, was won by the Syrian regime with lots of help from Russia. You may remember there was all kinds of atrocities committed. A lot of civilians lost their lives in the bombing campaign that went on, et cetera. But then there was relative calm. And by all accounts, it looked like, Syria had weathered the storm and they had relatively won. But that was a big relative, because even at that point, and actually let me toss this map up here and to kind of show you, this is what Syria looked like before 27 November. So you see in the upper right-hand corner, that purple area, that's where there's a lots of the Syrian Democratic Forces. That's where the most of the U.S. Little small bases are peppered throughout there. You see the yellow area at the top. That's where Turkish forces have been involved. Then you see that gray area where it says Idlib in the upper left-hand corner. That's where the rebels and the opposition figures never lost control. The government of Syria never regained control over that. And then all the red area there in the main area was what the regime held. And then that light blue area there toward the center of the screen, that was kind of where, again, some of the U.S. forces were located as well. One other interesting thing to point out here that's going to come into play significantly here in the coming days is Tartus. You see on the far left-hand side on the Mediterranean Sea. That's where the Russian naval base is, their only warm water port that they had. And that is very much going to be the center of a lot of discussion about what's going to happen with that. As of this morning, the still acting prime minister of Syria, who decided to stay on when Assad left, to try and help transition into the new regime, as they're calling it. They said that that's going to be decided by the new regime. They said that we don't have anything to say about that. That's going to be up to Russia. And I assure you, Moscow is scrambling to try to figure out what that's going to mean. And that could have significant strategic implications for the Russians. I want to make something clear, though, that's important, is that, a lot of people hear, on the news all the time about HTS. We showed some comments from one of their leaders a couple of days ago about what he thinks they want to accomplish, which was the overthrow of the regime. That mission was accomplished. And then he said that basically we're a lot more moderate than we were. We're not like the Taliban. We're going to come in pluralistic and all that kind of stuff. That remains to be seen. But what's also important to understand is HTS is one of many groups involved in this big sweep south. For example, there was some other specific actors. There was the National Front of Liberation, Ahrar al-Sham, Jaish al-Izza, New al-Din al-Zinki movement, several Turkish formations, and then others have come under this umbrella that's roughly called the Syrian National Army, as opposed to the regime's Syrian Arab Army. So you see, there's a whole lot of groups here. Now, they just won a big victory here, and on the surface of it, it's like, yay, that's good for us, and we're now going to take over. But I mean, far from a monolithic group. If we look back at history as what happened in similar cases where people have common purpose and then they're working towards a common objective. Once that objective is accomplished, now all of a sudden you have a lot of different actors saying, okay, now here's what we're going to do. No, we're going to do this. No, we're actually going to go over this way. Here's what we're going to, you see what I'm saying? So this has every possibility to get a lot uglier. A lot of other things that are going to be happening right now, because although Assad has certainly left, and right now it's unclear. There was a reported that a plane was shot down. Actually, HTS itself claimed responsibility, said we did shoot down a plane that left. They think Assad was on it, but there's been no confirmation as of the time of this video. But that leaves a lot of people to have to figure out what's going to happen next in Syria. One of the big ones is this 200,000 member Syrian army. Now, I want to make a point about this army, first of all, and how this rapid destruction of Syria took place. Because at least what's been reported so far, and anything I've been able to see even before coming on this show right now, there were no pitched battles. There were no, like, the Syrian opposition forces came down. They met them outside of the city of Homs, and there was a big fight and lots of tanks and, whatever. And then all of a sudden they pushed through. There was none of that. So far, every time this force escalated and moved forward, the Syrian army moved backwards all the way through until finally in Damascus, they literally just start taking their uniforms off, a la what happened to the Iraqi security forces in June of 2014. So what that tells me is the most likely case, and I'm sure that time will tell, and they'll start and analyzing this. When you see an entire army that out of nowhere doesn't even put up resistance, that implies strongly something what I observed in Afghanistan during my last combat deployment there, where many of the Taliban were making secret deals with members of the Afghan security forces. And there was some times where they said, hey, you don't shoot us in this area, we won't shoot you. We'll just go forward here, and then they'll work together. We intercepted some of their secret communication, so I know this for a fact. That's also a lot of what happened, much of what happened when the Taliban eventually swept into power in August of 2021, because they made a lot of deals with the Afghan security forces and said, hey, there's no reason for us to fight. Look, this war is over. We're going to roll up here. You just set your arms aside, move on, go home. That's all you need to worry about doing. And that's exactly what they did. And that's why the Afghan war collapsed so quickly. Something similar appears to have happened here. And again, I think we're going to find out that some deals were made probably with a number of Syrian army generals, other military leaders that, hey, we'll give you safe passage. We'll take care of you. You can join the new regime, whatever. Some kind of version of that happened because no one fought, that it appears. So I think that this was probably a conspiracy that had been building for a long time. And then when these guys launched this in late November, I think that there was already a deal in place, and that accounts for this literal deterioration and the disintegration of the Syrian army. But then the other aspect of this, though, is what's going to happen to those guys? What's going to happen to the foot soldiers, the ones who probably didn't make a deal, but now what's going to happen? Because now America has some experience with this when we, defeated Saddam Hussein, and then there's this large army that had been governing for, decades. All of a sudden, they're out of a job. Now, we disbanded them and outlawed the Ba'ath Party and all that. So suddenly, all these guys were out of a job. And then you had the Sunni Shia dynamics that came into basically fire and just started this another civil war within Iraq, which was the insurgency and all that. We certainly know how all that played out personally. But now then, what is the HTS, or this conglomeration of all these different groups? What are they going to do? Are they going to disband the Syrian army? Are they going to incorporate them? Are they going to offer them a job? That remains to be seen, because if you just get rid of them and make the huge mistake that the U.S. made, those guys are trained, they have weapons, and they want to eat. And if you don't give them a path to a safe transition, then they're going to do what anyone is going to do, and they're going to form an insurgency, and they're going to defend their families. I mean, that's just how it works. And they're going to band together because it's the only thing they know. So that's going to be one of the next big things to watch, because, folks, there is so much possibility for this to turn into a huge bloodbath. The civil war that was raging in its early stages, and how bad that was for the country, that could all be repeated and exceeded, depending on how the various players play it, how this conglomeration, how effective are they at keeping themselves together and having common purpose in political realm, besides just the military realm. And what do they do with all these people, these Syrian military folks? Then there's the Syrian people themselves. Lots of people, even in Damascus, were significantly harmed by this Bashar al-Assad regime. And there's a lot of bitterness. Lots of people were killed. Lots were imprisoned, etc. They're going to want retribution. Bashar al-Assad himself is gone, but there's a whole lot of officials there who carried out these orders and these edicts, and people are going to want revenge. And so I assure you that's going to be an issue here. And we've already heard a lot of reports, coming just as the sun came up today, of looting and all kinds of thievery, just like we saw in Baghdad when Saddam Hussein was deposed. You had all kinds of people just looting everything. I'm sure that's going to happen too, because the economy, as you may recall, was in absolute shambles. And a lot of them, even the military, they didn't have enough to eat. It was a lot of trouble with that. There's also lots of external players as well. And let me just put this map back up here again, and you can see, Turkey was initially openly supportive of this movement, these opposition figures moving down south. But then they also said, well, but we don't want instability, so we're not really sure. But now then they have an opportunity to possibly take more action against the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is going to put them in the crosshairs of the United States, because the U.S. is supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, has for a long time. Are we going to turn our backs on them now and just say, well, hey, you guys are on your own? Are we going to turn and push pressure against our NATO ally Turkey if they start going into there? You see, this could put us in a lot of trouble. Now, I'll just tell you flat out, the first thing the United States needs to do is get every one of our troops out of there right now. Trump tried to get this done when he was president in 2020. And he allowed himself to be talked out of it by some of the people that were in the Pentagon and in the State Department, Department of Defense, et cetera. Lots of voices were pushing against that, because they claimed this ridiculous claim that somehow there's benefit to the Americans. There never was. All it was is gotten some of our troops killed, a lot of them wounded over the time, and has produced absolutely nothing of value. And that's on top of the physical cost of maintaining these things in a foreign country where all you can do is airlift in supplies every day. So that's the first thing that needs to happen for the United States. We need to get rid of this strategic vulnerability that we've been fostering like a festering wound, an ulcer for all these years that we've been having in there since Obama first put them in there. We need to get them out of there. So that's the first point. Then we need to do everything we can diplomatically to work with Turkey and the Syrian Democratic Forces to come to some kind of an accommodation, so that there doesn't turn into a big pogrom there, because that's also not in our interest. But it's not in our military interest. Trump said, actually, I think it was about 36 hours ago or so, he said, this is a bad situation, but it's not our deal. This is not anything that affects American national interest, and they're going to have to figure this out. And I expect that he'll probably do that. The question is, what is the current administration going to do in between now and then? Hopefully they won't do anything that's going to cause any problems and exacerbate this situation. But because they're still in charge, they need to get our troops out of there. In the South, we also have some issues with Israel. Now, Israel, interestingly, about I guess it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, was seen having built some new fortifications south of I think it's called the Alpha Line, where the separation between Syria and Israel. And it was unexplained. No one was explaining why you're suddenly building what appeared to be, anyway, some kind of fortifications along the border, almost as though you thought there might be a possibility that someone from Syria would be moving south, which didn't really make sense at the time because the Syrian army was, I mean, we knew it was bad before. We didn't know it was this bad, but it certainly wasn't going to launch off into anything against Israel. And one wonders, because we know for certain that Israel over time has been providing assistance, weapons, and everything else to a lot of these rebel groups against Assad. So one wonders if they didn't have some advanced knowledge of this. And by the way, just this morning, Israel has announced that they have, Netanyahu specifically announced that they are moving some troops forward of the line. And now then they say, in this buffer zone, that we're going to retake the buffer zone and reoccupy it because we want our place to be secure. Again, looks like they were they may had some advanced notice of this. With the Mossad and the Shin Bet and all their intelligence agencies, I doubt that they were caught unaware of this. We just don't know to what extent they may have been directly involved, or may have been some kind of a deal that they were going to do this. That, who knows, they may have even helped them. These things always take time to come out. We're not sure about that right now. All we are sure is right now is that there's lots of fear in Syria. There were already lots of troubles with the functioning of the government and just getting food to people. There was, the economy was literally just wrecked. So now then there's going to be, this period where, and I was actually on an X space last night where there's some people from Damascus that were on the phone that were talking about what was happening there. And some of them, of course, initially were euphoric. You've probably seen lots of these images already of like Bashar al-Assad and Hafez al-Assad, his father, their monuments being ripped down all over the country. And I'm sure there's lots of people that, just like when Saddam Hussein fell, were really happy at first, but everything depends on what happens next. And that's one thing that we're all going to be watching for. We hope and we pray for the people of Syria, those who are always the victims of these things, just the regular people, whether it's the regime, whether it's these opposition forces, whatever, they're always the pawns in the middle, just like the people in Lebanon, in Beirut, et cetera. Even the civilians in Israel that were the victims of the 10/7 attack by Hamas. All these political entities and militant formations, they always fly back and forth, and it's just the regular people who are always the bill payers. And our prayers are with them this morning. We hope that this will break from the tradition of things that happen in the Middle East a lot, and that somehow these groups will form some kind of coherent government, that there won't be this widespread retribution and large killing, and that it won't devolve back into an even worse civil war than the one that started back in 2011. But we will stay on top of this for you here at Daniel Davis Deep Dive. We're always tracking this stuff for you, and we'll continue to do so. Thanks very much, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.